And joining us now to talk about your health is Dr. Megan Cobb, a pediatric emergency physician at the University of Maryland Children's Hospital and assistant professor of pediatrics at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. School is out for the summer, as they say, but pediatric ER doctors do not get the summer off. What are the most common injuries, illnesses that you would expect to see across the summer?
Sure. So first, thanks for having me. The most common things that we're seeing across the summer is a lot more orthopedic injuries, a lot more fractures, just from kids being outside more. Also, sometimes less supervision, so they do things that are a bit more risky. We're seeing plenty of head injuries, oftentimes off of bikes, but also in downtown Maryland, there are the scooters that plenty of people wear. And because it's typically an impromptu decision, almost no one wears a helmet. Some other things that we see are some injuries related to water safety, both boating, pools, and river tubing. We also see an increase in some asthma exacerbations because there may be less structure or less monitoring of the kids over the summer, and they may not be compliant with their medications.
All right, so that list would make me want to keep my young child indoors in bubble wrap all summer. But I know you're a parent, so that's not what you would suggest.
No, it really all comes down to just having the right support structure. We talk about it takes a village to raise a family. It really does take a village to keep these kids safe. So when we're talking about water safety, I don't want you to keep the kids out of the water. I just want them to be properly supervised, whether that's on a boat, if you're doing river tubing or you're at a friend's pool. You just want to make sure that someone always has their eyes on children. Some of the scariest videos I've seen are children who very quickly slip underwater and start to drown within seconds of jumping in the deep end. So there really are no seconds to waste.
Well, so what's the advice there? I mean, you're better off in a guarded pool, or at least with an adult competent swimmer who's paying attention, as opposed maybe to some murky body of water like a lake or a stream or even the beach?
So I would say the safest thing is that you have a competent swimmer, or you maintain a certain amount of comfort within a shallow water and keep that child within arm's reach at all times. Certainly, if you go into any murky water where it could be difficult to identify them should they slip underwater, really you should have a hand on them. We often, will see families post pictures about going tubing, and I see young children sometimes by themselves and my heart kind of skips a beat. You really want to be very careful to stay close to them. The river currents are deceiving at times and can really sweep these children away fairly rapidly.
And no shame in wearing a life jacket in that situation. They make cute ones these days.
They do. They make a lot of very cute floaties. They're, all sorts of characters. My son has a Spider-Man floaty with the little arm things. But definitely life jackets, especially if you're out on a boat, any large body of water, you want to make sure the life jacket is not only on them and secure, but it's well fitted. So please don't put a small child in an adult's life jacket, because what ultimately happens if they should fall in the water is they slip right out.
How about the heat? We've already had, mind-boggling 100-degree heat this summer. Do kids handle it any better or worse than adults?
Well, because of their sort of body mass to surface area ratio, which I won't bore you with the numbers, they can actually become dehydrated a lot faster than adults. They also tend to be a bit more active when they're out in the sun, more so than adults. And so if there isn't someone there reminding them to keep drinking, taking small, frequent sips is plenty, then they can quickly become overheated. We need to sweat. Sweating is a way that our bodies help cool us off. We also need shade sometimes. One of the things that we frequently are seeing is a lot of teenagers who are in their off-season training for scholastic sports are coming in with heat exhaustion, which can lead to things like altered mental status. It can also cause them to have muscle breakdown and require hospitalization with IV fluids.
And heat exhaustion, even heat stroke, which I believe is the more severe situation, can be difficult for untrained people to recognize, can induce confusion so that the person affected isn't really aware of what's happening.
That's correct. One of the signs of heat exhaustion and heat stroke can be slurred speech or just a decrease in alertness. They may seem overly sleepy or difficult to arouse. For someone, one of the differences between heat stroke and heat exhaustion is an acute neurologic change. So someone with heat stroke may actually have facial droop. They could have weakness on one side or the other. They could have difficulty walking, or what we call ataxia. And with heat exhaustion, they may just be quite fatigued, malaise, likely will have some vomiting or feel quite nauseous. Headaches are quite common, and they may even complain of blurry vision.
What's the first aid in that situation?
Ice, ice, and more ice. You want to pack the areas that you can cool off the best. So that's going to be the neck, the axilla or the armpit, and the groin area. If you can put them in an ice bath, that's even better. But I wouldn't recommend doing that unless you have someone who's alert enough not to slip underneath into the melted water.
You know, and that brings up the common dilemma faced by many parents when their child unfortunately is sick or has an injury of calibrating their response. Is this a call 911 situation? Is it a drive someplace? And is the someplace the urgent care up the street or the emergency department?
Sure, that's a very common question that we get. I would say when in doubt, just go to your nearest emergency department. I know that can seem laborious because wait times are not ideal. However, going to the emergency department ensures that you are going to get all of the care that you could potentially need, as opposed to some urgent cares that can only perform very limited treatments. If it's a minor bump or scrape or a very small cut or laceration, most urgent cares can help with that. I will say that in my personal and professional experience, most urgent cares are not as comfortable with very small children. So when you have an infant that appears to be more ill, I would certainly recommend an emergency department for them as well. If you are wondering whether or not your child might have a broken bone, some urgent cares will do x-rays on site. But certainly if you're looking at a wrist that doesn't look like the right shape, you should just go to the ER. We'd be happy to take care of them.
And certainly if there's a bone sticking out or something, that's the
call 911.
That's an ER situation. We talked about head injuries and other things that can happen when kids are out, whatever the scooter or whatever device they're on, a bicycle. You're a believer in helmets.
Very much so. We actually recently did a segment on how to properly fit a bike helmet. So we want to make sure that children are wearing helmets that fit them. Just because you've got 4 kids doesn't mean all 4 kids should wear the same bike helmet. Everyone's head is a little bit different. You want to make sure it fits fairly snug around so that you can get maybe just 1 finger in between the temple and the helmet. You only want about 2 fingers between the eyebrows and the bottom rim of the helmet. And then when you do your chin strap, there should only be 1 finger breadth in there. They should be able to yawn and the helmet kind of sinks down on them. Or if they turn their head back and forth, the helmet isn't shaking all over.
You mentioned asthma earlier. I'm curious, off the top of your head, if you would guess, what percentage of kids that you see in your emergency department have some sort of breathing difficulty, breathing disorder?
Sure. Well, working in Baltimore City, I would say that number is actually fairly high. Probably at some point or another, I would say nearly half the kids that we treat have had some episode of wheezing or have had some trial of albuterol or sometimes even hospitalizations. Baltimore City, in fact, has a higher prevalence of pediatric asthma than the national average. And Baltimore City also has a higher prevalence of asthma-related pediatric deaths than the national average. So I see quite a bit.
So summer creates all sorts of triggers that can affect those kids.
Yeah. Absolutely. The very hot heats when we are dealing with air quality issues, say the forest fire recently in New Jersey, that smoke blew south. Last year there was the wildfires in Canada. That air quality even affected us here in Maryland. Going in and out rapidly from very, very intense air conditioning into hot, humid conditions can also trigger it. And so the best way to manage your child's asthma over the summer is to actually prevent the exacerbations from even starting.
All right, so to sum up, if there's a parent or grandparent watching who wants to caution their kids, they heard a terrific doctor on TV talking about how you can avoid having to go to the doctor this summer. You're telling kids to have fun, but be safe.
Have fun, be safe. If you're around a pool, specifically if there's pool parties, if you would have a designated driver for people to get home, have a designated watcher for kids in the pool. If it motors, gallops, or rolls, you should wear a helmet. If you have asthma, please take your controller medicine and seek help early if you're having trouble breathing. If you're looking at a bone or a piece of your body that is bent the wrong way, just come straight to the emergency department. We'd be happy to take care of you.
Megan Cobb, University of Maryland Children's Hospital. Dr. Cobb, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.